Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. This series is brought to you by Super Guardian, a specialist self-managed super fund administrator known for their client-centric approach to their full-service solution. If you need SMSF support or CPD, check out the Knowledge Centre or sign up for Super Guardian updates at superguardian.com.au. Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and we are continuing with our self-managed super fund series. And today I'm joined by Allister Sutherland. G'day, Allister.
G'day, mate.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's been, and you're one of the all-time experts that when I talk to people around the traps, especially on the platform with XY, people mention your name like you're some guru in self-managed super fund.
No, I wouldn't put it that far, but I do love it a fair bit, so fair call.
You're exactly right. You do love it. Now, tell us about you. Tell us about where you are at the moment.
So I'm currently at Umina Beach and with a firm called Player Hall. So we do predominantly accounting work, and then there's a small financial advisory arm as well.
Fantastic. And you are the financial advisor arm of that firm. Quite a large firm, though, isn't it?
Yeah, there's currently two partners. One of them will be exiting at the end of this financial year, but then there's two other accounting staff, one part-time bookkeeper, and then an admin staff, and then Kate, who's our financial assistant. And yeah, we're currently looking for more staff, which is the fun and games of the accounting world at the moment. But yeah, that's us.
It seems to be the fun and games of not just the accounting world, but a lot of financial planners are also in that same position at the moment where everyone I speak to seems to be looking for staff.
Yeah, it's probably not surprising, really. I think COVID has done something quite spectacular in the sense of it's allowed more people to work from home, and employers realise that people can actually work from home effectively. And it just means that you can work 3 hours outside of Sydney, for example, and get Sydney prices. So not many people are wanting to move or change from that. So yeah. Fair enough. Now tell us about your story. How did you get into the profession? So my family still has a public practice, but basically my dad got the shits with me one year when I was at school, just lying around in bed, and dragged me out of my bed and said, right, you're coming into work for me today. And yeah, that's basically the start of it. So
good on you, Dad. Good on you. Way to go.
That's it. Oh, what a start. So yeah, that was my basically entry into the accounting world.
So your dad's an accountant with a practice and just said, no, you're coming in, sit there. Here's a calculator.
Pretty
fill
much,
in these forms. Yeah.
Here's a depreciation schedule you need to fill out by hand. So yeah, thanks, Dad.
But to be fair, you do actually love it, right?
Yeah, after I got over myself and a few years went by and I finished high school and stuff, then I wandered around for a year. Yeah, I fell in love with it, really. About 3 months in or something, I just like, yep, this is it.
Yep. And so you obviously don't still work for your dad. You've moved around a bit.
No, that's correct. Yes, I moved from there into a firm in Surrey Hills, which was absolutely fascinating. I dealt with all of the guys in the entertainment industry, actors, producers, editors, VFX artists, everything. It was awesome. And then from there, moved into Castlereagh Street in Sydney, and that was high net wealth individuals, which was really interesting to see what goes on there. And then finally traipsed myself up to Gosford because we decided to start a family, and my wife's from up here in Gosford, so hence managed to land a job up here. And then from there moved into Umina Beach at Player Hall.
Fantastic, and a beautiful spot of the world.
That's it.
And okay, so you've been mostly in New South Wales and Sydney, and working in a lot of accounting firms. Tell me about how where did this love for self-managed super funds come into?
Probably first kicked off when I first started. Really, is we had I got chucked into the deep end essentially, and was sitting in front of clients 3 times my age at the time, and I just for some reason picked up on the absolute joy of dealing with self-managed funds and the sheer accounting bliss of them, because all the records are there. It's like it's just handed to you on a nice little silver platter. And yes, there's, complex compliance stuff too, but that's just what I've really enjoyed most about them.
I love the way you say the sheer accounting bliss. I'm sorry, it just makes me laugh.
No, that's it.
The fact that you love them so much. And all right, so let's talk about some of the work that you're doing now with regards to self-managed super funds. Are you specialising in a specific area of SMSFs?
I would say, business real property acquisitions would be where I find the most joy, and even utilising small business CGT concessions to shovel as much money as reasonably possible into the environment.
Fair enough. And so you get a lot of people coming to you with the idea of wanting to purchase real property?
I wouldn't say a lot, but the existing clients that have approached me usually come and say, right, we're fed up dealing with landlords. We kind of want to do our own thing. It's a usual story even with normal renters, like you're just fed up, you want to own your own house, so fair enough. And then it's just broaching, seeing how we can get them essentially what they want.
Yep, fair enough. So let's go through that process then. Let's go through that process that you'd talk to somebody if they, maybe beforehand, then working all the way through the process. Let's start with sort of that pre-engagement space.
Yeah, so that is really notice. So all clients that have really had whisperings of, I'm thinking I want to do a SMSF with, and I probably want to buy some property in there, or just an SMSF in general. It's just enough notice, really, because we've had it in the past where client's done something and the next day said, I just bought this property, I want it in my SMSF, and then we as accountants are just there shitting ourselves because of the sheer volume of stuff that needs to happen for this to actually work. So just saying to clients, like, if before you even think about executing any documents, like just give me some heads up, guys.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And because you're absolutely right. Somebody finds the property, falls in love with it, and all of a sudden it's an immediate need.
Yeah, that's it. And which you can kind of understand, right? If you're driving past, you see a business real property and like, yep, that's it. I want that. And if the for sale sign's up or it's got auction on it, like you get it, right? So it's just trying to set the client's expectations that it's just not going to happen immediately.
Yep. So for somebody that you see that might be in that space, do you sort of drag them aside and say, right, if you're going to do this thing, we need a preparation time?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the minimum preparation time is roughly 28 days, really, which is mainly off the back of the ATO, because they are seriously looking into all ABN applications for SMSFs. So if something smells funny to them or they just want to take their 28 days, you can't do anything until you have that magical little ABN.
Okay, so that's a really interesting tip. The very first thing you need to know is give yourself at least a month in preparation and notice time. Is when you see the business real property settling though, is it a bit more like, say, residential property in that sense where it can happen quite quickly, or does it take a longer time?
No, settlement with business real property is roughly the same amount of time as resis. The one I did recently, we did extend out the settlement time, I believe, by 2 months, just to give us all enough time to sort out funding. So that'd be certainly another recommendation is if you can extend out settlement, do so.
Yeah, because it's not just obviously the setting up of the fund, it's the setting up of the funding that can take a long time, especially in this environment.
That's it.
So talk us through that process. Then the first part is around making sure you got time. What's the next part?
It's really in engagement with all parties, really. So we're not really talking about the advice document process now. It's getting all your contacts kind of lined up, who you need to speak to, and then the rough and kind of who does what, and then at what time and when things need to be actioned. So communication with all these parties is absolutely critical. Especially in the startup stage. Sorry.
Do you take on that role of the organizer or the project manager, I guess, of that?
Yeah, I do see myself like that. Just because there's, from the client's perspective, one centralized person that they're really dealing with. So if the advisor takes on this role, then we know that everything is going to work reasonably seamlessly, and the client's only dealing with one, two people, really at most, through all of this with the majority of their questions.
Yeah, it's not like they do it every day. So it's generally they're walking into an unknown space.
Yeah, that's correct. And then it's just all the other, fun compliance stuff that they're not particularly aware of that, as advisors and in the accounting world, it's just, it's a bit mind-boggling.
So do you have a process in place that sort of steps them through what's coming or what's expected in regards to all of that documentation, all that compliance, all these different moving parts that have to take place?
Yeah, well, I do that in the engagement process. It's, all right, you want to move forward with this. Here are the things that we need to do before you even think about, speaking to a broker, speaking to an estate agent, just to, again, set expectations and set reasonable timelines as well.
Yeah, is that a checklist that you have, or?
Not a formalized checklist. Like all good accountants and advisors, we hide things in our heads. So over time, it's just materialized. So it's just an automatic function for me. But yeah, eventually, I'd like to see this kind of a bit more formalized, because then at the end of the day, I need to train staff to do my job, and they need to know about this stuff. So
yeah, and every little piece of the jigsaw puzzle that has to be put in place at exactly the right time.
Yeah, that's it.
And so talk to me about setting them all up, because obviously there's a lot of headaches. So I just think about it and it just goes, it all seems like it's in the too hard basket.
Well, it is, I suppose, yeah. But if you take the approach of what I like to take, it's a challenge, but it's a massive opportunity. So it's just pushing that forward. And I suppose the setup process is getting the client engaged too. So what I did to my recent clients was I made them take the SMSF Trustee Education course, just straight off the bat, even before all this stuff started, to make sure they understood what was really going on. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones at most risk, followed by the advisor, then followed by the accountant and solicitor.
Yeah, and so that's the ATO course?
It's run by a couple other third parties, but essentially, yes, that's correct. Well worth. And
you recommend that anybody that's setting up a fund should be doing that course, or any advisor advising on a fund should be putting their clients through it?
Yeah, I believe so, really, because the experience has told me over the years that clients see it as a shiny little bell, and they kind of set and forget it without realizing that they're actually required to put a bit of time, effort, and energy into this, because they've got a fiduciary duty, albeit to themselves, but.
Yeah, exactly. But it'd be an interesting thing if you mentioned that and they went, oh no, like I don't have time for that, or that's pretty telling sign, isn't it, that they might not want to do all the other stuff that's required.
Yeah, that's correct. And the ATO, and if you ever put that in writing to the ATO, they'll immediately knock the ABN application back. So it's just ensuring that, you'd probably never reasonably put that in writing to the ATO anyway. But it is a telling sign if they're not particularly interested in setting it up.
Even just saying that to the client, if the ATO found out that you didn't want to do it, they wouldn't let you have it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we had a recent ABN application knocked back because it was a solicitor. She had a lot of stuff going on, and her husband was going through some pretty serious cancer stuff. And the ATO deemed her to be not a competent trustee for the sheer fact of there was just no time to really effectively manage the SMSF's affairs. So a bit of a gut-wrenching thing for her, because there was other stuff happening, of course. But it's just really important.
That would have been a really interesting conversation.
It certainly was. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that one.
Wow, yeah. I don't think anybody likes to be told that they're not deemed as competent.
No.
Especially when you're in a professional seat. And
yeah, that's correct.
You pride yourself on being competent.
Yep.
So talk us through this process, because I know there's a lot of moving parts to it, and I also know it can be extremely frustrating and inefficient. Talk us through this process and where you think it can sort of maybe get better, or where are the parts that really bottleneck?
The process really is ensuring all the entities are set up in the correct order, that the solicitor and the accountant and you as the advisor are essentially communicating probably more than average, really. I did spend a fair amount of time on the phone to the solicitor pre-setup, post-setup, and then even after execution of all documents. It was a couple of hours on the phone. And it's well worth it, really, at the end of the day. And even engaging an auditor too, if you have an auditor in your little circle, it's to make sure that, in my particular case, that the business acquisition plus the construction of the internal premises still meets the sole purpose test and doesn't cross over any other, funny SIS laws and stuff. So just pre-setup is quite critical.
Yeah, it's interesting that whenever you hear the word auditor, you're thinking about a past tense, right? It comes in they come in afterwards and they do stuff. So that actively getting auditors involved before stuff is set up is an interesting point.
It just makes you aware, because the advisor, you've got a lot of stuff going on in your head and you can't reasonably across all things. So, I mean, look, you'd probably, hopefully understand the basic concept of SMSFs, but it's just useful to have that, backup of, I can go to this guy who knows his stuff, he's done this before. What are the things I need to be aware of? And then, right, done, off we go.
Yep. And obviously the setting up of that, once it's all set up and executed, like you said, getting things done in the right order, which is the hard part. This is a lot of project management for you, I'm feeling. What's after that? So once it's sort of set up and then purchased, how long does this take, and how long does your process take? If you mentioned the 28 days to start with, but
yeah, so just as a timeline perspective, I suppose we set up. For this particular client, we set up the SMSF and the entities on the 9th of September 2020, did the ABN application essentially that day. I didn't get it immediately. I was shitting my pants. And then the process could really start. Then the LRBA documentation and bare trust deed and trustee company was set up the day after, because that's quite timeline specific, and then contracts were essentially exchanged and settlement was set for the 9th of December. And then in that time, we're hurriedly rolling over existing funds, then speaking to the broker to do all pre-assessment stuff, and then finally get their act together and essentially approve funding, which did take a lot longer than expected. So that was dealing with brokers was a bit painful, because they weren't really in my...
They're not even the person that makes the decision, right? Because they're dealing with somebody else. They're dealing with a bank or a lender.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's slightly worse for the fact of the big four banks aren't in the LRBA lending space, which kind of makes no sense, but anyway. So we're dealing with second tier, third tier organisations, and this one, the funding we got was through St George, but it's funded by Perpetual, how that massive circle of debt works, which is a totally other conversation. But just the sheer amount of time and communication that was, I suppose, almost wasted with the broker was quite frustrating. So, yeah, that was a mistake I had, was not engaging the broker probably sooner. and getting all the information to them faster.
Yeah,
so certainly a lesson learned in that.
It can be a tricky thing, but from the client's point of view, obviously getting this in place, I just want to run through the timeline again. It's a 28 odd days at the beginning to get the fund set up. You've got to roll everything in. You've got to get your contracts through. You've got to sort out your finance. Then you also, I guess, at the end of this, once the property's been purchased, it doesn't stop there, right?
That's correct. So after that, then there's more documents that need to be dealt with and make sure everything's signed and ready to go. And then particularly in New South Wales, the bare trust must be stamped within 3 months of execution of 3 months of settlement. So if that's missed, then you don't have a legal trust deed. And you can sort it out. Don't get me wrong. It's just penalties and stuff from ASIC, which are not something the client really needs to deal with. And then I suppose further on is making sure the accountant's got everything that they need to sort out the back-end accounting work. And then the ongoing advice conversation really is like, yes, you've just got this big lumpy asset. What do you do now?
Yeah, and you got to mould that back in with the rest of their financial strategies. So tell me about the different types of business real properties you see being purchased by people in their funds.
Well, what would you mean? What would you mean for that? Because it's as in
because it feels to me like it needs to be a particular size or a particular. Can it be just a small office, or is it generally specialist showrooms or specialist factories?
Yeah, in the firm that I'm with at the moment, there are a few that are mainly designed for manufacturing and warehousing, and then in the past, a few years ago, then there's more retail shopfront space for businesses, and the one recent client was a sound studio. So it can be. Oh, and then I suppose solicitors as well, their chambers. I've seen their chambers inside SMSFs, and then I suppose office spaces as well. I suppose it just comes down to whatever the client's industry is and what do they actually need.
Tell me about the sound studio. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's it. So he's a sound designer and engineer, and does some pretty cool stuff, and works for some pretty interesting clients in the film and TV commercial space. So yeah, he got kicked out of his old studio he was leasing. So and to set up a sound studio properly for full on, not podcasty stuff, proper sound recording for films and TV commercials, it's around anywhere from 100,000 to plus, basically, depending on how many studios you want in there. So this guy is spending pretty sure upwards of 250,000 on 2 studios in this one business premises.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you got to do a specialist industry like that, and you've got to spend a lot of money on a setup of a thing, and then your lease runs out, and you've got to move it. It's not ideal.
No, because it's sure, you can rip out the shell and stuff, and then re-import it into the next one. But how many times do you really want to do that? So hence, it was just solve the problem for the client.
Yeah, fantastic. And are you mostly local to that area, or do you look after clients everywhere?
Look after clients everywhere. Got a fair few people in Sydney. So that one, the sound studio guy in particular, is in Annandale. So I would probably say most of the clients are sitting in the New South Wales space on the East Coast. Yep.
Now, when you are setting these funds up, and obviously you do have to engage with other professionals, it's a huge part about it. Tell us about that process, because sometimes people can be a little bit prickly with your first off, I suppose.
Well, of course, it just depends on the angle you're coming at. It's because I suppose keeping in mind that the overarching goal is you need to get this stuff sorted for your client. So, having the right people around you, from, you as the advisor to then dealing with any accountant and then an auditor and a solicitor and a broker. If you've developed good relationships with all these guys, then the process is a lot smoother.
Yeah, fair enough. And obviously, because you're working with an accounting firm, and let's say that client might have a different accountant or accounting firm, has that ever been a problem, or do you just get the client to introduce you all, or do you just have to pick up the phone and talk to them?
Sometimes you just have to pick up the phone and just say g'day. Otherwise, if you have the existing relationships with the client, then it's like, all right, who's going to see who? Let's just all get into a room together, introduce ourselves, and let's just get it done. So, and because it's hard, because when I was in Surrey Hills, for an example, like I was not an advisor at that time, but I was as an accountant, sending all these financial advisory clients off to this, random dude, and then I'm seeing all the fees he's charging, and I'm like, oh, I need to get a part of this, because I'm here charging, just up to $1,000 for this client, and the advisor's charging upwards of $4,000. So I'm like, oh, damn it. So it's just respecting their relationships, have a coffee or a beer together.
Yeah, because it's an interesting, because if you're going to take the lead, I guess the point I was trying to make here, you want to take the lead on being the project manager, and I guess somebody's got to, but what happens if somebody comes to you and they think they're the leader?
It may come down to personality clashes, I suppose. For me in particular, if I'm seeing someone, as the accountant, seeing that the financial advisor knows their staff and, is dealing with me respectfully, and vice versa, of course, then I'm very happy to hand all that over to them, because that's, again, one less thing for me to worry about, and I know that they're going to be dealt with nicely as the client, so more than happy for that to happen. Again, if that doesn't work, then it's try to come to some form of compromise with the client, really, and get the client just a little bit more involved.
Yeah. So do you act as the advisor and the accountant in many cases?
In certain circumstances, yeah, that's correct. Just because of how I suppose the client gets the best of both worlds from me.
Yep. And in some circumstances, you'll act as one, but not both.
Yeah, that's correct. Because it just makes it's either there's already an existing relationship, so I'm never going to step on any toes, and it sometimes just makes sense that the role is split.
Yep. Fair enough. And with the communication, tell us about how you do that. Is that just constant emails and phone calls, or do you have a particular system in place where you can message people?
It would mainly revolve around emails and phone calls. So it's just figuring out who the client wants to deal with, or are they happy for you to engage, your own circle of professionals. Then just simple heads up. Phone calls, basically. I'd like to deal with phone calls. But whatever communication methods you have in place, as long as everyone's at least aware of what's going on, then it's pretty streamlined from there.
Yep, fair enough. I guess it's just, every way I look at this, it's just time consuming, isn't it?
Yeah, that is correct. There is a lot of time that goes into this, and it's your essentially sweat equity that you're putting into the client relationship. So why not try to make a really good effort for this? Because the business real property investment for the client, it's not like shares and managed funds and stuff that you trade on the market on either a daily, weekly or monthly or annual basis. This is something that's in place for 30 years. So, making sure that all the relationships are set up nicely at the start, and yeah, sure, it's hard work, but wouldn't have it any other way, because then the client loves you, all the other professional advisors love you as well, and then you're usually rewarded. Yep.
You're rewarded with a long-term relationship. Talk to me about that 30 years. I mean, obviously that, after you're purchasing property, there's a long-term loan in place, all those sorts of things. Talk to me about that and what you say to your clients in that space. If they're not prepared to put this in place for 30 years, it's not worth it, or 10 years or 5 years or whatever it might be.
Usually the premise for clients coming in and wanting business real property is because they want this long-term solution for them, because again, they don't want to rent anymore, and so they want to take a bit more responsibility and deal with their own property stuff. And I suppose 30 years is used because they may have changed the rules recently, but they've extended out debt on LRBAs in timeframes, so it's usually, I think it was usually maxed out at 15. So, you've got a 15-year time frame where you're stuck with this thing. So making sure that the business is essentially solvent and trading well and got succession planning stuff in the background's, useful to know, so that they're in this for the long haul.
Yeah. Do you go into that with them? as in their business plan, and if they're going to be able to, sustain their business and all those sorts of things?
Well, that's correct, because again, as the advisor, you've got to think of the best interest of the clients. And I suppose if we want to drag the FASEA Code of Ethics in as Standard 6, it's the long-term effects of the advice for the client. So as the joy of being the accountant as well, I get to put my little hat on and do cash flow projections for these guys and say, is your business doing well? Can it support this? And if it can, let's go.
Yep, fair enough. Now tell me about I feel like you've got a whole lot of stories inside you that things that went wrong, tips that you've worked out over time, things that went right, things that went wrong. Talk to me about tips and traps that you might have lined up there for, say, dealing with different departments.
Yeah, I mean, as we've mentioned before, the biggest one is dealing with the ATO. That's your first major hurdle, because if you can't jump that one, then you're stuck. So lining yourself up, doing the SMSF, getting the trustees to do the SMSF trustee courses, it's just a good lead in. Then I suppose the absolute joy I had out of this was dealing with a solicitor. So they found the solicitor, and it was a family friend, circle of family friends. And I just called them up and introduced myself, took the initiative, and asked them, do you understand what's going on? If you don't, well, here's 5-minute spiel as to what's going on. And I just loved dealing with them from start to finish, because they knew what was going on, they knew what they had to do, and they knew the timeframes up the background.
So do you take this as an opportunity for you to develop a new relationship with a new solicitor, and then be able to say, talk to them about other bit, or refer other clients to them if they need it?
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, I come with the mindset of, first and foremost, it's dealing with the client, your client at hand. So, do the job for them. And then if you do it correctly and you're dealing with these guys in a decent manner, then of course you're going to get rewarded, hopefully at the end of the day, by either client referrals, or you can refer clients to them. It doesn't have to be a two-way street. Really, that's how I perceive it.
Yep.
A couple of other... Yeah, what else? The biggest fall down for me was dealing with the broker. They weren't... Well, whether or not it was fun communication stuff, whether it was a failure on my behalf or, again, a communication in how I was writing this, it's just LOBAs usually have minimum cash requirements or minimum holding requirements. So I initially framed my question, what are these minimum holding requirements? And it was brushed off and never really came back to me with an appropriate answer. Then when I'm finally looking at the loan documents, I'm seeing this fee called the lender protection fee, which is, if you've never heard of it, it's like lender's mortgage insurance. And I picked them up on it and said, why are you charging this fee? It shouldn't be there. And then they explained, well, because you don't have less than a percentage requirements, this is why this fee is charged. And I said, well, I asked you about this a month ago, and now you're telling me about this. So that was quite frustrating and took a bit of time.
So do you think that when it comes to talking to your clients about finding the lender or finding the broker, that you really need to find somebody that's done this a few times before?
That's correct. Yeah, ideally everyone involved, all professionals involved, need to have had some level of experience in this. And the brokers, not to pick on them, they've just got a little bit of stuff to catch up on, I think, from an advice disclosure process, and especially fee disclosure process. So it's just ensuring that, we all know what's going on and what are the actual requirements from the lender's perspective. Because they only usually lend up to 75% or even less. So and then what are the other fun conditions that they want to impose? So it's finding out these up front can be slightly difficult, because until the application's in front of a lender, they're usually not interested in looking at it.
So I guess you could say to your client, find a solicitor, or we'll help you find one. But it's important that when you do interview your solicitor or interview your broker or we find an auditor, that it's somebody that's done several of these.
Yeah, that's correct. It makes the whole process a lot smoother.
I guess that's a really interesting tip for one of the first things probably that you need to say to the client that's looking to purchase a property?
It's getting your professionals lined up at the start. Who you as the client, who you want to dealing with, who do you want to be dealing with, and then you're doing your due diligence as the advisor and checking them out and just giving them a couple of quick phone calls.
And as you mentioned, a lot of the big banks aren't getting involved. What are you seeing? Who are you seeing that's lending in this space if it's not big banks?
There's usually second tier organisations. So without going into any particular names, the funding, as I said before, the funding's usually done by Perpetual or other large organisations such as them and Latitude, because that process is quite complicated onto how they raise funds to essentially service debt. So which can be quite a bit of a challenge.
Yep. And do you have any tips or traps around the accountants or lawyers?
Yeah, as long as, for the accountant's perspective, I would say as long as they're given enough time, like all things, that we're at least aware of what's up and coming, and then that the accountants are given all the back-end documentation to essentially make sure that their year-end financial reporting can be done in an appropriate time frame, and they're kept reasonably happy. Yep. They've got all the records, as I said, accounting bliss.
Yeah, exactly right. Accounting bliss. And talk to me about the clients. How do you see them? What tips or traps do you have for the clients that they need to be aware of?
Well, the critical one is really their understanding about what they're actually getting themselves into. So their time and responsibility, hence the course, their capacity to do so as well. So are they going to be in this kind of thing for the long haul? And then secondary to that is, well, the costs. So I don't think you'd get too much change out of $20,000 with all this, really, if you broke it all down. So it's setting their expectations that, this, to get you what you want, this is a bit of a costly exercise, but it's your investment over, if you say $20,000 over 15 years, it's actually not that bad. And then to make sure that they've got funding. So as the example for my client recently, they didn't quite have enough cash inside the fund, so they had to ensure that there was enough cash to essentially shovel into this thing to meet, the lender's requirements at the end of the day to get this thing over the line, plus the construction stuff.
Exactly. It's an interesting concept when you all of a sudden you slap a $20,000 figure on there saying, well, it's going to cost, $20 to set it up. So as you said, over a long term, it works out, but in the short term, it's going to be a hit to the fund.
Yeah, that's it. And then another strange one would be, as long as they continue to pay the ASIC fees for the trustee companies. I came across a trustee company recently under an LRBO arrangement that had paid their fees for some time, and ASIC delisted the company. So when we came across that after in the shock and awe, it's like, well, nobody actually owns. The state actually owns the property now. So we sorted it out and got it back online again. But it's just making sure all compliance costs are paid.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's obviously that's what auditing sort of thing does as well, doesn't it? They pick up on all that stuff, but it's once it's done, it's done. It's about fixing it. Trying to be proactive and trying to be proactive in a lot of states, a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Now, tell us about technology throughout this process, because I kind of feel like technology has improved some of this reporting stuff in a way, but then hasn't necessarily worked its way through the entire process.
No, we're still dealing with paper signatures, which again, there's some ancient history involved with that. Communication has been improved in the sense of, if we're separated geographically, we can still reasonably speak and see each other's faces without too many problems. So I'm quite grateful for all the video conferencing systems out there.
Do a lot
Yep.
of them still not accept the DocuSign type, online digital signatures?
Well, it's just with trust deeds. There's funny rules around. Can they be executed correctly and legally with a DocuSign, with an electronic signature, or does it still have to be a physical signature? So there's trust law is quite ancient it's quite young in Australia, but ancient in the UK. So I think we're still hanging up on that a little bit. So not entirely too sure how they're going to resolve this. One of the other requirements is for me as a justice of the peace is to certify these documents. So I'm not entirely too sure if I can certify a digital signature, because again, what lengths do I have to go to check the IP address and make sure that the date and timestamp is actually correct, and what's the process involved in there? Because that's what the bank wants. They want certified copies of trust deeds. So
yeah, interesting, isn't it? I guess citing and certifying is one thing, and then witnessing signatures is the next hard thing. I guess witnessing, the online signature. Anyway, that's probably not for us to solve.
yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your experiences with dealing with business real property inside self-managed super funds and all the little bits and pieces that go along with it. Because obviously it just seems to me like there is a jigsaw puzzle is a good way of putting it. There's just so many different pieces to the puzzle that have to be put in place at the right order. So congratulations on the work that you do. Allister, if somebody wants to continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Yeah, come and join me online at XY Advisor. There's certainly a lot of pieces to put together, and always happy to guide advisors through this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Pleasure speaking with you, mate.